Hi, Raffael, and welcome to TechDrive Zürich. So, as introduction, this show is basically a discussion with different people in the tech industry around Zurich, around Switzerland, and eventually probably worldwide. And the idea is really to get to know what different aspects of technology development cover. And that's why I'm very glad to have you on board to actually understand a bit more about VentureLab, VentureKick, what is your role there, and basically how you see the whole tech ecosystem. So maybe we can start with a short self-introduction and a bit of your background, actually. Where do you come from?
Okay. Sure. Thank you, Justinas, inviting me to this podcast in your beautiful car. It's fun. It's getting a feel for technology at work. About me, I work with VentureLab for 6 years now. About my background, how did I get into this? So I have a regular business degree. I studied in Germany, and then I moved abroad right after my studies. I went to Slovakia, and in Slovakia, I was a part of the startup ecosystem over there. Also in Vienna, in Austria. I loved it immediately. So I came from business school, knew nothing about startups, even though you are supposed to know about entrepreneurship, but you really only get to know what entrepreneurship is about when you meet entrepreneurs. And that's what you do in the startup community. I had a small startup myself. We had a nice run for 2 years. It was in the app market when apps just started to take off on iPhone and Android. And we made a few revenues, but it was not... The competition was too tough. We were basically kicked out again. I learned a lot and then went into typical consulting companies for a while, which also taught me very valuable skills, especially in business development. I think it's very useful to be in such a setting for a while to learn from clients, but missed something. I missed the meaning, When you're big,
like only too big of a machine.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah. So when I later was in Zurich, in Switzerland, and I saw this opportunity at VentureLab, I applied for a position there, and I thought I would only do it for a short while before I start my next thing. But turns out that I enjoy it so much that I'm still here. And I get to learn every day from entrepreneurs, from investors, from people who are still not entrepreneur, but scientists working on very interesting projects at ETH and other interesting universities. So it never gets boring. Yeah, and how do I help them? Startups, they usually struggle with a lot of similar things. It's always related to raising money,
so I thought
paying customers.
You can also give a bit of a background of VentureLab if somebody you is not familiar with.
VentureLab is the Swiss ecosystem organization when it comes to innovative startups. So I would guess about 80% of innovation-based startup projects go through our programs. The most basic is when people get into starting their companies, they have an idea, but they don't have really the knowledge how to do it. They enroll for one of those InnoSwiss funded programs, and then they will, for the first time, usually meet entrepreneurs and investors who coach them on building a company. So far, it's only a project. Now it's supposed to become a company. And then the second thing that usually comes right after is if the entrepreneurs or the soon-to-be entrepreneurs are decided, okay, we give it a go, they need to find resources. They need to apply for funding. So many of the best projects win VentureKick. We work very closely with them, right? Because we're very connected to them. And then over the course of the years, of course, the challenges change. In the beginning, maybe it's about, how do I even build a prototype that is attracting investment and interest from the market, maybe from a pilot customer. But later then, when the company is a bit further ahead, the challenges change. They need to go to global markets, and I'm also very interested in that. I deal a lot with Asia lately, especially China. I think very meaningful because I think what is cool in Switzerland is you have a fantastic launchpad. You can build projects, you can validate them here, you can take them to the world from Switzerland, from this fantastic ecosystem that we have here with this very global mindset that we have here. And that's what I work on.
Thanks a lot. And it's not only for startups, because I was maybe half a year ago in International Business Day in Bern at Swiss government. And it was actually the same message that many corporations, like well-established corporations with R&D or like product offices in Switzerland, said that the key aspect is also the Swiss precision, but mainly long-term investment in underlying and base technologies that you can then build upon. Strong universities that really gives kind of a base to have something to build upon, but then you provide the kick in a way to actually get that. As you organize many events and work with many researchers, I guess you do go to universities to talk to researchers and help identify the projects which can move towards commercialization. If I was in the shoes of researcher, how should I establish maybe my R&D work if my dream is to actually move towards startup, towards commercialization of the project?
So it's true. I spend a lot of time at the university. So probably 1 or 2 days per week, I will be in the field and meet people who are working on interesting stuff. I think the key thing is to know that you want it. So that is the critical part. If a scientist is totally passionate about their research, but they want to stay in science, pursue an academic career, that's fine. And that's totally acceptable. If someone thinks, hey, I see so much potential in what I'm working right now, and I don't think anyone will do what I can do. Also, you develop this kind of inner drive. Hey, if it's not me, nothing will happen. People have worked on research on a topic they strongly identify with. Bottom of their bellies, right? They feel this passion for the mission. If you know that you have this mission to change something, this is the best base. From then on, we can work with these people. Because a person who knows why he or she is doing what they are doing will be very open to learning. Yeah, they will accept feedback from other people. Even if they don't like what they hear, they will accept the feedback. If a very experienced entrepreneur or investor tells them, hey, you're on a promising track, but here you're doing a big mistake, correct it or you will not be successful, then they will not take it too personal. They will say, okay, if that person is telling me, and they certainly have the credibility to tell me that, then I will take that feedback and work on my case, make it better so that investors and future users and customers will like what I have. Because ultimately you will not make any meaningful impact unless you are successful on the market. So that is something that I try to identify at the universities when I talk to the people. Do the people not only have an interesting project, but also other people are motivated? And if they have trouble identifying that, then sometimes one of the first things to do is really to work with friends, with partners, with trainers to really nail down what is your passion. Why are you passionate about this project? The rest is very, very systematic, right? The trainings, the process of applying for funding, a lot of that is very systematic and we can help them with them.
Very interesting because I think generally when you take the two worlds, like the research world, you have quite defined rules, sometimes exploration, but you're a bit in perfectionist role because you're trying to push sometimes this few percentage of accuracy or find new solution, but still to some problem that you don't necessarily have to justify if that problem is really relevant, let's say for everyday user or a big market. But when you jump into the startup world, it's more or less exact opposite. So the solutions often don't need to be perfect, but they have to be good enough. But they have to be easy to use, easy to integrate, and basically easy to scale. Do you see that problem popping up quite often? There might be like a very cool technology that somebody developed, let's say during their PhD or postdoc. And once you start to productize it, it doesn't quite fit and you need to change even the core of technology. But then the founder doesn't necessarily want to do that.
Yeah, sure. You see that, and that's very unfortunate. And that should not happen, because before you build something, you should already validate, is it even wanted and needed? No matter how convinced you are that the world totally needs what you're working on, you still need to talk to people and check whether this is the case. I mean, the good thing about being a scientist is that you've already learned how to suffer. Right?
That's true.
Because finishing your PhD, I mean, that's not just fun work, right? It means that you need to do a lot of things that you don't like in that moment, but you know it will pay off over time. And I think with that attitude, you're already quite well prepared for the startup project. When you wrote your PhD, you had to learn how to take feedback from a professor, right? And I think that also prepares you to be more accepting feedback from users who will first interact with what you are building, or even when you're just interviewing people to find out what they think about your idea. Yeah, but if you build something that ultimately is not needed or wanted by the market, then probably you've made a mistake during the process. All what we do is basically in the beginning to make sure that this doesn't happen. So this is about the training. This is what we do in the coaching. Talk to your users, talk to your customers, and learn from them. Have an open mindset. And we have the data to show for it, right? 84% of venture kick projects succeeded in the market. You know, and we have 20
impressive.
years of history. In 20 years of history, 84% of the projects did not die.
This is the programs that completed the full process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because also you have multiple steps in the
Right.
process. And I guess it's also not everyone who starts finishes the program.
Yeah, venture kick is competitive. Cases that win, and win at least first stage. Okay, the first stage is still little money. It's just 10,000 francs to start working, and then you can apply for more, for 40,000. Later you can apply for 100,000, and you can even apply for follow-up investments for the Kick Fund. And disclosure here, I am invested in the Kick Fund, so I'm a huge fan, and I hope all the investments will work out well. But what I'm telling you, 84% success, that's already for the projects that only made it into the stage first. So when we see stage 3, I don't have the data with me right now, but I would guess the success rate is far beyond 95%. So yeah, there is a mechanism to pretty much secure success.
As you also organize many events, both internationally and bring startups also to showcase around the world. What's your impression, basically? What are the strongest traits of Swiss startups? And where do they excel? And what might be the missing elements?
Okay, if I can think of 2 ingredients of that really help us fundamentally a lot, so to say, the unfair advantage of Swiss projects. Number 1 is just the quality of the IP. I mean, you have some of the best research institutions here in Switzerland. So anything that comes out forms a very good base. You can compete in areas of technologies that others cannot. So that is great. And I think that is well known in the market. So if you travel to America, to China, to Japan, or just in neighboring Europe, and if you're coming from Switzerland and say it's a Swiss-based innovation project, then they will at least listen to you. That's already great. The next thing that I think is a great advantage is that Switzerland is extremely international from the outset. The majority of the senior researchers, I mean, to be honest, they are not originally Swiss. They are talents who have come from all over the world to Switzerland because education and research opportunities are great. And then they start companies based on that. They speak English, right? Their teams speak English. So everything is set up already in a way that you can scale it internationally. And that's very useful. Now, what are the hurdles? I think if there's only one thing that I can point out to where we have to improve is that I think we are not accepting enough yet that the world is changing. So Switzerland is a totally European country, and traditionally we have always been extremely well connected to America. Yeah. At the same time, we just have to accept that the fact that GDP growth in the world is now shifting to other regions. Actually, if you really put it all together, the center of the world's economy now is not in the Western Hemisphere anymore, it's in Asia. And my observation is that we're still very ignorant about a lot of the most fastest growing large markets in Asia especially, but maybe also in other regions. There's one wish I would have for people is to really learn more also about these exciting new markets that may sound or feel a bit more exotic, that are maybe outside of your comfort zone, to travel there, to learn about them. But you're working for a Japanese firm, right? So I think that once you've overcome your first resistance and you've been there at least once, then it almost feels like a treat that you are allowed to work on these markets, because they are exciting, they are new, they are fast, they are growing, they are very innovative, they offer huge opportunities for us. So I hope that the Swiss startup ecosystem will become more open, not just focus on the traditional Western markets, but also for the large and emerging economies of the future.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think getting exactly the exposure to the technology, but especially to the culture.
Yeah.
Because that's what actually drives a lot of development.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, like working with like Japan, with Asia, cultural and kind of even just the way you approach things is quite different. But then it's much easier to understand once you've spent at least a couple of weeks there discussing with locals. And I'm very curious to see about the shift, what's going to be kind of on the leadership, because now we see a lot of race happening, and this race now is worldwide. It's going to be super exciting years. Talking about the new technologies, was there something that you recently saw that was like a wow moment for you?
I think I have that very often. I mean, there are obvious things that are changing and that have huge implications also on society. What you see in robotics, what you see in AI. This is not just some relevant improvement, some field of business, no, but it's really transformative for societies, right? So I recently traveled to China and I was at BYD and I learned how they manufacture cars. It's basically happening in dark factories. That means the robots are doing the work. They don't even need cheap workers anymore. They don't have cheap workers in China anymore. That's the past. Yeah, actually, exactly. Now in China, workers are also expensive, right? But robots are doing the work. And they are creating the cars. And those cars, I mean, they are already capable of driving autonomously, and maybe regulatory is not far enough yet, but basically you're cutting the human out of a lot of the production cycle, out of the use cases later. And that is very interesting. That is very interesting. And I think even the smartest investors and technologists, they don't know how this is ultimately going to change society. I think a lot about that. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities, but there are also some things that will create real social challenges. That's beyond just technology. It's also a social consideration.
I think for China, the issue is that here in Europe, we don't necessarily have such a strong visibility. Yeah. Actually, what is the actual situation besides what we see maybe in like public videos and so on. Yeah. Same, I come from a robotics background. Yeah. I see robots doing backflips and so on, but what's the actual use of it? Yeah. And that's very different, I think, compared to what we expect it will happen and what actually happens. If you were to do a startup now yourself, knowing what you know, but what would you do today?
What would I do today? So first of all, having seen so many startups succeed, but also some fail, again, I would like to come back to the core thing. It's the mission. You need to know why you're doing something. And you need to be passionate enough about it to basically only focus on that. And not just for now, but basically for 10 years to come, because that's how long it takes to bring a startup to success. So it becomes a very personal consideration. What am I passionate enough about to basically ignore everything else?
Because you have to fight through, like,
Yes.
during the process,
Yes.
many times.
Yes.
Many more than you expect.
So, and what, I think I'm a bit more flexible when it comes to really the product or the users that I would like to serve. But what is very important to me are my fundamental values, right? So is what I'm working on something that makes meaningful impact on society? And so I ask myself very deeply, what are the major challenges that we have in society right now? And for me, living in Switzerland, in this rapidly changing world, I think one of the worst things that I see in the world right now is that we have so much violence again. If I could make a change, is like really work in a field where we can have meaningful collaboration with other markets, where we work on positive changes. I would have trouble working in a field where there is a strong dual use case of technology. I would like to work in any field where I can build a product that increases life expectancy of people, where people have economic benefits, like on a wide scale, like lots of people benefit from it, not just a few. And then also, I think if it's a use case that is scalable in those emerging markets, then I think it can help to get Switzerland connected to those new, large, promising markets. And let's face it, a lot of these emerging markets, right, they stay out of the big trouble, No matter what you say about China, but currently China is not in a war, right? And Indonesia is not in a war. India and all of those, they are relatively peaceful. So, I would feel good about working with those markets. Yeah. And that is some consideration that I have at the back of my head as well.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think that's like a very good point, that we're used to having the partners, but now the whole geopolitical situation is so dynamic and not necessarily in a good way. Let's hope that the whole ecosystem, actually, because like also VentureLab as single unit cannot really establish everything. I think it's all about different players working together and kind of syncing on many of these aspects. Thanks so much. Thanks a lot for joining.
Thank you, Justinas.
It was great to get your insights. Yes. Always super fun to get your opinion. And thanks for joining the Tech Drive.
Thank you, and for sharing the passion. I think this is great. Thank you.
All right.